Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast, where we explore key topics that matter most to small business owners across Canada. Today, we're diving into one of the most critical elements of business success, which is compensation planning. And compensation directly impacts employee retention, motivation, and overall business growth. And with small businesses facing increasing competition from top talent, knowing how to effectively plan compensation is essential. We're very excited to have Jason Sachs, the senior principal in Mercer Canada's career business, join us today with 10 years of experience in compensation and total rewards consulting. Jason has guided companies in designing effective compensation programs, pay equity strategies, and much more. And prior to Mercer Canada, Jason contributed his expertise as a research associate at the Conference Board of Canada. So today, Jason is here to provide us with insights from August 2024 Mercer Canada Compensation Planning Survey. Jason, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. How are you?
Thank you very much, Faheen. And thank you for the invite. It's my pleasure to be able to share our recent findings and happy to share some trends that we're seeing.
Very pleased to have you with us, Jason. Now, let's begin by looking at Mercer's August 2024 Compensation Planning Survey, which provides a comprehensive overview of compensation trends in Canada. And there's a report is quite essential resource for businesses, especially small businesses, as they strategize for the year ahead. Jason, could you please start by sharing the key highlights of this report or the survey, and what salary increases can Canadians expect in the coming year?
Yeah, I would love to. So I'll start by giving a bit of a background on what the survey actually is. So this is we call it a compensation planning survey. Mercer runs one every year. We run a couple of surveys throughout the year. The results I'm going to share come from our August survey. What this is basically we ask organizations to let us know how much they are planning to increase their salary budgets. And this survey, we had about 570 organizations participate. It covers a broad range of industries and organizations of all sizes, of all different headcounts, of all revenue sizes. So we really use it as a pulse check to get a sense for what the Canadian market is doing with respect to their pay increases.
Mhm.
And the key highlight was that we found that organizations are considering an increase to their payroll budgets of, on average, 3.4%. Now, that number is the projected total increase budget. So that means that organizations are planning to, on average, increase their payroll budgets by 3.4%. And that's to cover a range of increases from everything, including promotional increases for employees that are being promoted to the next level in their careers, as well as what we call in-range progression or merit increases for individuals that are simply just getting a little bit better in their role and progressing through their salary ranges. So
Mhm.
the total increase number was 3.4%. And then for organizations that had an explicit merit increase budget, so excluding promotions and across the board COLA adjustments, the projected merit increase was 3%. And what that really means for individuals in their jobs is that if you're an average employee in an average organization, next year in 2025, from what we're seeing now, you could expect to see a salary increase of about 3.4%.
Mhm. Well, that's really insightful, Jason. I mean, these trends are crucial for businesses as they plan their strategies or their budgets and adjust compensation packages accordingly. But were any of these findings unexpected, or did the data align with what you anticipated for the year 2024?
So they weren't actually that unexpected. Certainly, as we were going through the COVID pandemic, and as we were coming back, people were getting back into work. We were seeing high inflation, like we were seeing high CPI. We were facing this wave of turnover. We were referring to it as the Great Reckoning and the Great Shift Back to Work. The war for talent was at its peak. People were jumping careers and jumping jobs. So unemployment was at a record low. There's lots of labor market movement, lots of competition, and it was driving a lot of, and combined with high CPI, that was driving, increased expectations from employees. We were seeing record high increased budgets of around 4%. That was the peak that we saw in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
But the labor market today is a lot more, I wouldn't say it's calm, but it's not as intense as it was in 2023. So we're seeing some slowdowns in the economy, both in Canada and the US. We're seeing some waves of layoffs, both in Canada and the US. And all this is contributing to a bit of a loosening in the labor markets. And so what's happening is organizations are taking a bit more of a conservative approach to their increased budgets. They don't have to be as aggressive with attraction and retention as they had to be in 2023, combined with the fact that they're a little bit more uncertain with what the next year is going to look like in terms of business performance and in terms of economic performance. And so we're seeing organizations be a little bit more conservative with their increased budgets. So we're coming down from the peak increases that we're seeing in 2023, but we're still at a relatively healthy level of increases from compared to what we were seeing pre-COVID in 2019, 2020.
Well, these insights provide a valuable look at how compensation trends are shifting. And as business owners, keeping an eye on such data really helps them prepare for the future. And listeners, compensation planning isn't just about paying people more. It's really about staying competitive, driving employee satisfaction, and ensuring long-term business sustainability. So whether you're planning for the next quarter or the next 5 years, understanding trends like these can give you an edge in retaining your top talent. Now, Jason, coming up, we'll dig into the industry specific trends and see which sectors are leading the way in compensation because compensation trends they can vary greatly depending on the industry, and businesses need to understand how their sector compares to others when it comes to salary increases. Yeah, which industries, according to the survey, are leading in terms of salary increases, and are there any specific sectors that stand out in 2024?
So this is actually a bit of I'm going to call it a boring finding in this case, because the increases were actually pretty flat across industries. In previous years, we've sometimes seen, leaders or we've seen some industry sectors stand out from the rest as offering higher increases. This year, however, it's pretty flat. Life sciences and insurance came out at the top of the pack. Mining and metals was at the lowest range, but we're not talking about a wide spread between the highest industries and the lowest industries. I mean, really, it's a difference of half of a percentage point. So it's actually pretty tight between the industry sectors. What that means, in my view, is that, again, if I think about the average employee in the average organization, it's not actually going to matter too much whether you're in uh, business services or whether you're in financial services or whether you're in pharmaceuticals or life sciences. We're expecting the salary increases to be pretty consistent across the industry sectors.
Industry trends are a key indicator for businesses to benchmark themselves, and really understanding where your sector stands can really help, small businesses make informed decisions about salary and promotion strategies. Now, up next, we'll be discussing the growing trend of pay transparency and what that means for small businesses. Now, Jason, can you please shed some light on the current state of pay transparency in Canada, and are there companies adopting this practice, or is there some resistance?
So this is a fascinating topic. Pay transparency is a hot topic in Canada. We, as the Canadian market, we're probably lagging what we're seeing in the US. So there's a couple of things happening. There's changes and shifts in employee expectations and what they're expecting to see, and what employees in today's generation, how open they are to talk about their salaries. So we're seeing a shift in employee expectations. So they're expecting greater transparency. And we're also seeing a shift in legislation. So in Canada, there's a number of provinces that have put in place legislation mandating that organizations post the salary range or the compensation range for any job postings that are going up in that province. BC is the latest example where that's come into effect. Ontario has its own pending legislation. It's the pay transparency piece is not in effect just yet, but it's something that is on the books that we're expecting to see. So we're seeing a wave of legislation that's requiring this greater degree of pay transparency, that's requiring that compensation ranges be posted on job postings when they're advertised. And we're following a similar trend that we're seeing in the US. The US is further along than we are, but there's a number of states across the US that have put in place similar legislation. What's happening is that employees now are able to see for themselves what salary ranges are for jobs that are getting advertised. And that has two implications. One, if you're an employee looking for other job opportunities, looking to jump to a competitor or looking to change careers, you're able to get more information about what kind of salary is out there for you for jobs that you might be qualified for. But the other implication that we often forget about are employees within an organization that even if they're not job shopping, the fact that they're able to see a job posting that might be for their job and they're able to see a salary range posted online for that job, if that salary range is different from what they're actually being paid, you're going to have some employees coming forth with some concerns. So this idea of pay transparency is picking up steam. We are seeing legislation that's requiring this greater degree of pay transparency. In terms of how organizations are reacting in Canada, I would say that we're certainly seeing some hesitation to adopt full transparency. So yes, organizations where they need to are certainly complying with the legislation, but we're not yet seeing a majority of organizations go above and beyond what the mandated compliance is. And we're also seeing, we're not seeing a clear preferred practice in terms of what gets shared on those job postings. So some organizations, as an example, in a job posting, if they have a salary range, they might post a small subsection of that range. They might post what the target is, plus or minus like 5 or 10%. They might post what the full range is, which would be like a target rate plus or minus 15 or 20%. They might post, some organizations have a national salary structure or national range and then geographic differentials that are applied to it. So, a national range with maybe a premium if you're on Ontario and BC and maybe a discount if you're in other provinces. And so some organizations are posting like what the geographically adjusted range is. The point is that there isn't a clear trend in terms of, there isn't consistency in terms of what it is that organizations are actually posting. And what that's telling us is that organizations are still figuring out what their approach is going to be with pay transparency in Canada. They're still figuring out what exactly are they going to post and what exactly are they telling their employees within the organization.
It's clear that pay transparency is something that both employees and businesses are navigating carefully. While it can foster trust, it also requires careful implementation. Jason, are companies proactively communicating their pay policies, or do you think that there's still hesitation when it comes to being fully transparent about salaries?
I do think there's still a lot of hesitation. And in our view, it's probably the next thing that I would advise any organization start thinking about. Even if, for example, in Ontario, if you've got people in Ontario, if most of your operations are in Ontario, and if you're a small or medium-sized business, I would suggest that you start looking at your compensation programs and you start looking at, where are people paid within your salary ranges? Do you have salary ranges? How ready are your managers to start having compensation management related decisions with their employees? Now is the time to start getting ready and start putting those ranges in place, making sure that individuals are actually paid within those ranges, and start equipping your managers with the training and the talking points before you need to go and post. And by doing those activities, you'll set yourself up for success for when the legislation actually does hit in Ontario and when you do actually have to start posting. But it is one of the items that it's if you think about how your engaging with your employee population and how you're attracting and retaining, it's not just about offering a competitive salary. I mean, you hit the nail on the head when you said it's about building trust with your population. And we find that when employees have trust with their employers, it really helps support that retention and keeping those individuals engaged. And it means that if your employees have trust in, they may not completely agree with, the salary increases that the organization is putting forth, but if you've built a trust with those employees and they understand why you had to make a more limited merit increase budget, or why you had to make the pay decisions that you did, they have trust that you've done that in a fair and equitable way. That actually goes a long way to keeping them retained. And if they have that trust, they might just hesitate a little bit longer before jumping on another job opportunity.
Right. No, it's clear that pay transparency is no longer just a trend. It's becoming a necessity in today's workforce. And companies that embrace transparency, they tend to foster more trust and loyalty among their teams. And to all the business owners tuning in today, please, transparency is key to building trust, as Jason emphasized, within your own organization. And it's not just something about opening up the books, but also about creating a culture where your employees feel valued and respected. So please consider how transparent practices can create a stronger, more cohesive workforce. And on the next part of our conversation, Jason, we'll shift our focus to how small businesses can use these insights to attract and retain talent in a competitive job market. Now, in today's job market, we see that, small businesses need to do more than just offer competitive pay. They really need to think about long term retention strategies to keep top talent on board. But beyond competitive salaries, what else can small businesses do to attract and retain top talent in this challenging environment?
So we've been talking a lot with our clients and at our meetings about this idea of the employee experience, and how can you deliver a compelling total rewards and total employee value proposition to your employees. And the idea of this employee experience is that it goes beyond just the salary and benefits that you're offering your employees. At the end of the day, a 3.4% average increase to compensation, it's not going to it's not going to give you the budget to make all the increases that you want to make for all the awesome people on your teams. It's just not our reality, and it never has been, it never will be. And so
Mhm.
what organizations are doing now is they're trying to look at, okay, yes, we need to make sure compensation is competitive and benefits is competitive. But once we've done that, how can we make other aspects of our employee experience with us smoother? How can we build that trust? And an example I like to think about is, you know, some of the aspects we focus on are things like career advancement. So if you can clearly articulate to your employees what the next job opportunity is within the organization, what is the next promotional opportunity, what skills do they have to work on in order to position themselves for that growth. Being able to articulate what that career path looks like in your organization can help employees visualize and start planning out how they are going to grow in their career. And so if they're only getting a 3% increase this year because they haven't gotten the promotion yet, they can at least start thinking about, okay, what do I need to work on? What do I need to develop to get to the next stage in my career? And what are the job opportunities that are actually available to me at my current employer? And oftentimes it can be as simple as clearly articulating and defining, like, what are the different levels of work at the organization. As an individual contributor, can I go from entry level to experienced level to senior level? Are those three distinct levels of job that I can grow through my career before I get to manager? How high can I go? How big can my job expand before I have to become a people manager of others? Being able to document those career paths and get those into the hands of employees can go a long way to actually showing them what their career prospects are at the organization.
That's a great point, Jason. I mean, offering more than just a paycheck can make a huge difference when it comes to keeping employees engaged and loyal. But for small businesses with limited resources, what are some practical, low cost strategies that they can implement to improve retention?
It's a great question. The big one that comes to my mind is offering, what do call it, flexibility. And the first thing that often comes to mind when we talk about flexibility is work from home and having a flexible schedule. And that certainly is one important aspect. But we also started talking about flexibility in terms of not just where am I doing my work, but flexibility in terms of what projects am I working on? Who do I get to work with? And so if you can think about how are you going to provide those different aspects of flexibility to your employees? Are you going to let them work from home? Are you going to let them work from a different province or work from a different country for a month or 2 months at a time, if that's something that you're able to do, and let them, work remotely and dial into the things that they need to dial into. But coming up with some of those flexible strategies helps you offer value to employees without having to see a real substantial increase in your compensation. It doesn't necessarily require an investment in a new program. It's just getting creative about uh, are you going to require employees to come in 2 days a week or 3 days a week, or are you going to let them be fully remote?
Hmm.
So I would suggest that you think about how can you provide flexibility there in terms of where people are working from, but you can broaden that approach and start to think about, can we give employees more flexibility in terms of what projects they're going to work on, other employees they're going to work with, or other teams they're going to work with, so that they have opportunities to actually branch out beyond the borders of their rigidly defined job description, but can we actually give them opportunities to cross train and get exposed to different areas or get exposed to different subject matter, which is not just interesting to them if they get to broaden their skill sets, but it's also potentially valuable to the organization or to you as a business owner, um, in that you're actually building broader skill sets in your employees, and you're potentially able to deploy them in other areas to cover, you know, talent shortfalls or to cover capacity issues.
Attracting and retaining talent is a challenge that every business owner face, but by focusing on the employee experience and providing career development opportunities, businesses can really build a loyal workforce. Um, Now, Jason, in our final segment, we'd summarize some of today's key takeaways and wrap up with a final thought from you on compensation planning. Now, as we look into the future, compensation planning will undoubtedly continue to evolve, especially as businesses adapt to economic changes and workforce expectations. But Jason, what do you see as the future of compensation planning for small businesses, and are there any trends or developments that business owners should be preparing for in the years ahead?
The future as we see it is much more focused on skills and what are the different portfolios of skills that employees have, and what skills does the business need to achieve their objectives, and then how do we deploy those skills to get that work done. So in the past, we've always talked about work in terms of jobs. Like we have a specific job description, there's a set of duties and responsibilities, there's a piece of, there's a set compensation range for that job. But what we're seeing now is a shift towards, never mind the job and a set of tasks that employees have to deliver, but what are the skill sets that are required in order to deliver that work? And what's happening is, as we're seeing work evolve much more quickly with the introduction of ChatGPT, right? We're seeing people use ChatGPT to write job descriptions. We're seeing them to use it to help write emails. That's a skill set. And so what's happening is we're entering this world of greater automation. We need new and different skill sets. Jobs are changing more quickly, and organizations are starting to focus on, okay, what are the skills that we have in our organization today? What are the skills that we need to do the work going forward? And what are the skills that we're going to need to achieve our business objectives? And then once we know what those skills are, who in our organization actually has those skills? And where do we need to invest to develop people? Or what skills do we have to go out and buy from the market so that we can get the AI expert that is able to start training and developing our resources internally. So what's happening is we're seeing this greater emphasis on not so much what are the specific tasks and duties that jobs are delivering and how do we value those, but we're now becoming more and more focused on what skills are required in order to do those things. How do we pay competitively and appropriately for the skills that our people have? And what we're doing is we're paying for the skill sets that they bring, and then we're figuring out ways of how do we deploy those skills in the organization. And as an example, that mean this week I'm working on one project team, one capacity to provide my, my AI process automation skill sets to that project team. A month later, I'm going to switch to a different product or switch to a different project, and contribute in a different way to a different project team. So it's all about focusing on the skills that are needed within the organization and figuring out how are we going to pay for skill development? How are we going to progress individuals' pay as they develop and refine their skill sets, not just as they take on additional tasks and duties?
So it's so exciting to hear about what's on the horizon for compensation planning, and small businesses need to stay informed and adaptable to thrive in a constantly changing landscape. Now, Jason, before we wrap up and let you go, if there's one key piece of advice that you would like to give to small business owners as they plan their compensation strategies for the next year, what would it be?
So I'd have two things to say about this. One is that while our comp planning survey says that the average increase is 3.4%, that's just what the market average is doing. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what you need to do in your organization. So
Mhm.
what we're advising organizations do is use this data as a reference point, but really think about, based on your business strategy and based on your business objectives, what do you need to do for your payroll, for your employees, in order to achieve those business objectives. So as an example, if you historically have been, if your pay has been below market, as an example, adopting a 3.4% increase to your payroll is just going to maintain pace with the market. You're not going to close the gap. So
Right.
every organization is going to be in a different place in terms of their overall competitiveness. And in some cases, you may need to make a greater investment to either close the gap, or you might need to make a greater investment in a particular function or a set of jobs because they're mission critical to your organization. If you have to go and find and onboard a bunch of AI tech developers or process engineers, you might need to focus more investments in those types of skill sets because those are the mission critical skill sets that you need to put your new product in place next year. So that would be my first recommendation. Think about what budget makes sense for you based on your needs and based on what your employees are looking for. My second recommendation, or my second parting comment, is think about pay transparency. And as I said earlier, it's coming. The legislation is coming. It's in place in some areas. Now is the time to take a good hard look at your foundations for pay transparency. And so your foundations are really, do you have salary ranges in place so that if employees ask for them, do you feel comfortable having your people managers explain to their employees what the salary ranges are? Are your employees actually paid within those ranges? And if they're not, now's the time to focus some of that merit budget that you're planning, get the individuals that aren't in the range into the range so that you are ready to start disclosing what those ranges are. Start equipping your people managers with the talking points and with the training so they understand how you actually design your compensation programs at your organization, and equip them with the talking points so that they can have real conversations with their employees to help the employees understand how the comp ranges work and why an individual employee might be positioned in the lower part of the range or in the higher part of the range. Those
Right.
are all activities that organizations that you can start doing now to get ready for when you actually have to start putting your salary ranges on those external job postings.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much, Jason, for sharing such valuable insights with us today. I mean, your expertise has given our listeners a clear understanding of the compensation trends to watch and how they can apply these strategies through their businesses. Again, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maheen, and I appreciate you bringing me on. It's been fun.
That's the end of our discussion and a conversation with Jason Sachs. And as we conclude today's episode, I'd like to extend him a huge thanks for sharing his invaluable insights into compensation planning and how small businesses can navigate these changing trends. From Mercer Canada's 2024 survey findings to industry specific trends, pay transparency, and talent retention, today's conversation has been incredibly informative. We'd also like to give a big shout out to our partners, RBC, UPS, Constant Contact, IAG, and Google for their continued support making this podcast possible. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to learn more, please head over to our website, CanadianSME.ca. Subscribe to the magazine for more insightful content and don't miss out on our future discussions as we continue to bring you the latest business insights to help your business succeed. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you.